Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into autistic inertia.
Okay.
You've been sending us a bunch of sources about this topic.
Right.
Seems like you really want to get into it, so we're going to try to unpack it as much as possible.
Yeah.
And looking at the sources, we have kind of a mix here. We've
Yeah.
got personal stories, we've got some expert analysis, even some advice and kind of myth busting going on.
Right.
So it seems like you want to get at not just what autistic inertia is, like why it happens and
Mm.
what we can do about it, if anything.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Am I right?
You are spot on. It's a topic that really needs more clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the more we all understand it, the better we can support ourselves or others who are dealing with it.
You know, I was thinking about this the other day. I had
Mhm.
this big project I had to do, and I could not get started.
Mhm.
And I was feeling so stuck, like my brain was just not working.
Mhm.
And I was thinking, is this kind of like what autistic inertia is? But from what I'm reading,
Yeah.
it's a whole other thing.
Yeah. It's definitely a whole other level. And it's not just a matter of like willpower or motivation. It's a neurological thing.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge.
Okay, so let's break it down.
Okay.
What is autistic inertia? How would you define it?
Yeah.
And how is it different from just feeling lazy or not wanting to do something?
Yeah. That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the sources we have here, Cheap ABA, it defines autistic inertia as being locked into a particular activity or mindset,
Okay.
which makes it really difficult to start new things or
Yeah.
to stop doing something that you're already doing.
Okay.
So it's like your brain is stuck in neutral,
Mm-hmm.
even when, you need to shift gears, but it's not as simple as a car.
I like that analogy.
There's a lot more going on under the hood.
Yeah, why is it so hard to shift gears then?
Right.
What's going on in the brain that makes it feel like you're frozen?
So Cheap ABA talks about four main things that contribute to this.
Okay.
The first one is sensory overload.
Okay.
Imagine your brain like a computer.
You okay?
A lot of autistic individuals just processing sensory input,
Mm-hmm.
the sights, the sounds, the textures. It just takes a lot more processing power
Oh, wow.
than it does for other people.
So they're already at max capacity just handling everyday life.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So there's not a lot left over for starting new tasks or switching between tasks.
And anything could just tip them over the edge then.
Yeah, like a change in routine or an unexpected sound can completely throw things off.
Wow.
They give an example in the source about a kid who's really engrossed in a video game.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly it's time to stop and do homework.
Right.
And for that child, that shift in, what they're seeing, what they're hearing, the change in routine, it's like a system crash.
Wow. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So it's not defiance or anything. It's just their brain can't handle it.
Right.
You mentioned routine, though, and that was the second thing, right?
Yeah, that's the second big factor.
Okay.
Routine provides a sense of predictability and safety. And so when your brain is always working overtime to process the world,
Yeah.
those routines offer a break.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
If my morning coffee routine gets messed up, my
Yeah.
whole day is thrown off.
Exactly.
But I imagine for someone on the spectrum, that's amplified like times 10.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a much deeper need.
So disrupting that could really trigger anxiety.
Oh, absolutely. And stress, which just makes that stuck feeling worse.
Right, because you're already overloaded.
Exactly.
So it's really important to understand what each individual needs then.
Yeah, what might be a minor annoyance for one person can be a huge obstacle for someone else.
Right.
So we've got sensory overload reliance on routine.
What are the other two pieces of this puzzle?
So the third one is executive functioning.
Okay.
Think of that as like the air traffic controller in your brain.
Okay.
Managing all the task planning, organizing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of autistic people experience challenges with that,
Okay.
which makes it difficult to initiate tasks even if they want to.
Oh, so even if they have the motivation, they might not have the ability to start.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's like having all the ingredients for a cake,
Okay.
but no recipe.
I get it.
The potential's there, but you don't know how to put it all together.
Right.
And that brings us to the fourth factor, which is emotional regulation.
Okay.
So new or unfamiliar situations can trigger anxiety and stress for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
But for some autistic individuals, those emotions can be a lot more intense.
Yeah.
And that leads to avoidance behaviors, which kind of fuels the cycle of inertia.
Right. So the more you avoid it because it makes you anxious, the sparier it seems.
Exactly. It becomes a loop.
That sounds so frustrating.
It is.
So if those are kind of the root causes, is there anything that can be done to help people break free from that?
There is. And that's what makes this topic so interesting. Understanding the why is the first step to finding strategies that work And that's what we'll get into next.
I am ready for solutions.
Okay.
Stay tuned, everybody, because we're going to get practical. All right, so we talked about the what and the why of autistic inertia,
Right.
but I want to get to the solutions.
Okay.
What can people actually do to help themselves or someone they care about get unstuck?
So Cheap ABA has some really practical advice.
Okay.
One that I think is especially helpful for people who really need predictability is using visual schedules.
I've heard of those.
Yeah,
It's like having a roadmap for your day.
exactly.
It's visual so you can see what's coming,
Yeah, it takes away the element of surprise, which can be really overwhelming.
and you can tailor those to the individual too.
Absolutely. You can use pictures, symbols, written words, whatever works best for that person.
So it's not one size fits all.
Right.
Okay, what about timers?
Timers are great.
I've seen those mentioned a lot in these sources.
They provide those clear boundaries,
Mm,
like you know when an activity starts, when it ends.
right.
So it's like a gentle nudge to move on to the next thing.
But I could also see how that could be anxiety-inducing for some people.
Oh, for sure.
If they're already stressed about time.
Yeah, so it's about knowing the person.
Right.
Instead of a traditional timer with a loud alarm,
Yeah.
you could use a visual timer,
Yeah.
like a sand timer,
Oh, that's a good idea.
or even an app on your phone where you
Yeah.
can customize the sounds and the visuals.
So find something that's supportive, not stressful.
Exactly.
We were talking about breaking things down earlier, and that's something I think we all struggle with.
Right.
Not just people with autistic inertia, but, just everyday overwhelm.
For sure, big tasks can feel really paralyzing,
Totally.
but when you break them down into smaller chunks, they're more manageable.
So let's say someone's been putting off cleaning their room.
Okay.
That can feel huge-y.
Yes.
How would they break that down?
Instead of cleaning the whole room,
Right.
maybe just start with one corner.
Okay.
Focus on picking up all the clothes first,
Uh-huh.
then maybe clear off the desk just one step at a time.
Little by little.
Yeah.
So you don't get overwhelmed. You get that feeling of accomplishment, like you did something.
Right. And that can build momentum.
Okay, so what other strategies do we have?
Well, one that I think is really interesting is incorporating interests.
Okay.
Cheap ABA talks about how important motivation is.
Mm-hmm.
So connecting tasks to things that someone is already passionate about can really help.
Give me an example.
So let's say someone loves dinosaurs.
Okay.
You could use dinosaur figurines to teach them about counting.
Oh, that's fun.
Or you could create a dinosaur-themed story to help them practice writing.
That's really smart. You're kind of sneaking the learning in there.
Exactly.
Like it's not a chore, it's fun.
Right.
What about transitions?
Yeah.
Like that in-between time?
It's definitely a skill that can be developed with practice.
Okay.
Cheap ABA suggests role-playing transitions in a safe environment.
Oh, that's interesting.
So maybe practicing leaving a preferred activity or moving from one room to another.
So they get used to it.
Right. And starting small
Mm-hmm.
and celebrating every success.
So it doesn't feel so scary.
Exactly.
And of course, we can't forget about creating a calm environment.
Absolutely.
That's important for all of us.
Minimizing sensory overload is really key, especially during transitions.
So what would that look like?
Maybe creating a quiet space with dim lighting,
Oh.
reducing visual clutter,
Mm-hmm.
maybe using noise-canceling headphones.
Like a sensory deprivation tank?
Kind of.
Not quite.
It's about giving them a safe space.
Where they can reset.
Right.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah.
We talked about what autistic inertia is, why it happens,
Mm-hmm.
and now we have all these strategies to try.
Right.
Before we move on, I want to bring it back to our listener.
Okay.
What's the main takeaway here?
That's a great question, and I think you're in a great position to answer that.
Okay.
What resonates most with you?
Well, I think what really stuck with me is that this isn't like a personal failing or something.
Right.
It's a real neurological thing that can really impact someone's life, but it's not hopeless.
Yeah.
There are things you can do.
Yeah, there are things we can do to support ourselves or the people in our lives who might be struggling with this.
And it makes you realize how important it is to, educate yourself.
Yeah,
Challenge those assumptions we all have.
for sure.
Speaking of assumptions, I've been thinking,
Hmm.
we've been talking about autistic inertia, but how might it look different in adults versus children?
That's a great question. And it's an area where we need more research,
Right.
for sure.
Right.
But while the underlying mechanisms are probably similar,
Yeah.
the way it shows up might be different depending on, how old someone is, their
But
life experiences.
what kind of support they have.
Exactly.
I was thinking maybe an adult could be better at masking it at work,
Oh, yeah.
but then at home they just completely shut down.
That makes sense because at home they feel safer
To be themselves, yeah.
to let their guard down.
And adults, they develop coping mechanisms and they learn to kind of mask those things to fit in.
Right.
But that's got to be exhausting.
It is incredibly taxing. It's like running a marathon in disguise.
Wow, yeah.
You might look like you're keeping up, but inside you're burning out.
So self-care is so important then
So
for
important.
autistic adults.
Rest,
Yeah.
finding supportive environments, honoring your own needs.
Those are all crucial.
Yeah.
So if we're listening to this and we know someone who might be struggling with this, what can we do?
Well, I think it starts with education.
Mm-hmm.
Learn about it. Listen to autistic people share their experiences.
Really listen.
Yeah. And challenge your own assumption.
Be open to being wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And remember, support can look like a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Offering practical help,
Yeah.
creating a sensory-friendly environment,
Right.
just listening.
Sometimes that's the most important thing.
It is just to validate someone's experience.
Just believe them when they say they're struggling.
And let them know that you're there for
And
them.
not judge them. Wow, this has been really eye-opening.
It has.
I feel like we just scratched the surface.
We did.
So what final thoughts do you have for our listener?
I'd say, knowing what you know now about autistic inertia,
Mm-hmm.
what's one small change you can make today to support yourself or someone you care about?
That's a good question.
It could be trying out a visual schedule,
Yeah.
breaking down a daunting task,
Mm-hmm.
creating a more calming space.
Mm-hmm.
Anything.
Any little step.
Every step matters.
Well, it's been a pleasure diving into this with you today.
Likewise, it's been great.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive